Welcome to Kibbe on Liberty. So I'm trying to figure out. I feel like you have been on this program even more than Thomas Massey.
I disagree.
Because we did that first show, which was kind of totally half-baked.
Yeah.
Where you interview me.
Mm-hmm.
And we just did the show on how AI is going to destroy everything that you care about in the world.
Yeah. With my publisher.
Yeah, maybe we should just talk about that some more.
Yeah, we can start that. No, I don't need to talk about it. I think we're all AI'd out.
Yeah.
You know, it's over.
But you've come around. Like you no longer think that AI is the end of the world.
No, there's other things that are going to end us sooner, I guess. Yeah. AI will existentially end us at some point, but I think we'll probably kill ourselves before that.
Yeah. Yeah, and which is a perfect segue to your latest project. And the reason we've gathered today is that you have a new book.
House on Fire.
House on Fire.
Yeah. It's a graphic novel.
That is coming out imminently.
Well, so it'll be in comic shops as of this recording, next Wednesday. And then it'll be in bookstores on the 25th or the 28th of March.
So soon.
Very soon.
Yeah. And this was and this is by no means your first comic, but
no.
This is a real passion project for you because of what we lived through for the last 3 years.
Yeah, this is what I did during my COVID vacation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least you did something. I don't think most people did anything. They just got fat. Yeah.
Well, I did it. The I think the first page I did was I did it in May of 2020. Like I did the original, the first conception of the story, and then I did did the RV trip with my dad down to Texas. And then during that drive from Philly to Texas, I kind of wrote up what would become this, because there was such a stark contrast between what was going on in Philly and then I don't know, as you're driving through the middle of the country, it was totally different vibes.
Yeah.
Like a whole different world in a sense.
And so what is the story in a nutshell?
Well, I'm trying. Other people have described it way better than I have, but
well, I'll correct it after you butcher it.
You tell me what it's about.
I wrote a small review of this, and I'll be expanding on that. But one of the most fascinating. It's a dystopian story about this unimaginable world where the government doesn't allow you to leave your community, and the government decides what healthcare services you can or cannot have, where you can go, what you can do, whether or not you're allowed to push back and speak up about it. Mm-hmm. So like a completely unimaginable dystopian.
Completely. This is all background. World. I mean, the story is basically what do you do if someone you love is hurting? What are you going to do to fix that?
Yeah.
That's ultimately the plot that's the question that's at the core of it.
And you'll do anything.
Yeah, and then eventually, do you sometimes do things that you maybe regret, or what do you have to give up or lose of yourself to fix a problem? And that's I think that's the core emotional struggle. And then all of the world stuff is, I think if you're awake in the past 3 years, it should be terrifyingly relevant.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, you don't say as much, but for someone like me, and if anybody that watches the show knows exactly where I have come down on the government's response to the pandemic, I think it's been a humanitarian disaster from day one. And it's fascinating to me that you started conceiving of this story in May of 2020.
Yeah.
When I think for some of us, I mean, certainly at Free the People, we were having conversations about how catastrophic this would be.
Yeah, we were in a very dark place.
Yeah, we were in a very dark place because by that point we realized that they weren't going to stop helping us.
Yeah.
and we just wanted them to stop because everything was getting worse. But I feel like very early on we were talking about the structures of authoritarian oppression that were emerging to keep us safe.
Yeah.
And now, like, that stuff's more apparent, I think, to a lot more people. But the fascinating thing to me about science fiction, would you call this a sci-fi? I would.
I mean, it is. It's a sci-fi. I think it's unfortunately closer to fiction than it is science fiction.
Well, that's what I'm learning about science fiction. Is
it always comes true in some way.
It always comes true in some way. It's predictive of the future because it imagines the unintended consequences, I think, to a lot of dumb things we do. And in a lot of the great science fiction stories, the government becomes a monster.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you look at, it's funny, you look at like a movie like Blade Runner, where it's sort of predicting the China takeover in a way, because it's set in California, but so there's all these little seeds in so much of good sci-fi that are like, you see happening today.
Yeah,
it's maybe not in the way that you expected it, but there's a lot of predictive power to it, and I felt like in making this book that I wanted, we've in my sort of life so far, there have been two really sharp turning points in American history. The first being 9/11 and the subsequent response to that. The War on Terror, the Patriot Act, all of these things that I think that there was a pretty huge artistic response to it. The thing that stands out in my mind, because at the time I didn't get it, but I remember seeing Springsteen on the Magic Tour, and in the intro to the song Living in the Future, he talks about all of the awful things that the Patriot Act had just put into permanent fixture in American life. Now, granted, he dropped that sort of shtick after Obama got elected, so it was almost, but the point being, the point is that it was all
we're
true.
not gonna pick on Bruce.
No, we're not.
No.
And so like there was a lot of art made out of that, right? And we can go on, and there were tons of movies and things, and I don't think we've seen that based out of the pandemic, and so I think that if you're gonna make art and you're living through some period of time I think anyone can say this is a pivotal moment in history. I think a responsibility is to comment on it in some way. And, you look to the 70s, that's what people did. And I worry that there isn't enough cultural commentary. And that's why they're going to be able to memory hole a lot of the awful things that they did.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about this all the time, but it seems like the creative community, certainly what's left of Hollywood, or now it's I don't know what you call Hollywood anymore. It's like Netflix or whatever.
Yeah.
Big tech, I guess, is
big
what it
streaming.
is. Big stream. The creative, the natural creative artistic impulse to question authority and to cut against the grain doesn't seem to be there anymore. They seem to be marching in lockstep and certainly on everything COVID related.
Well, there's other than like the occasional funny parallels, like I don't know if you watched that Dope Sick show that came out. I don't remember when it came out, but it came out over the course of COVID, and that's about the opioid epidemic. And there were a lot of links of why you maybe shouldn't trust Big Pharma in that show. I just don't think that at the time when it came out, people weren't like applying that lesson to what was going on at the present.
Yeah. At Kibbe on Liberty, freedom is a lifestyle 24/7, something you live and breathe and wear every day. If that describes you, you need the very best Liberty swag in the market today, just like this shirt I happen to be wearing. Go to freethepeople.org/KOL and check out our exciting merch. You too can love Liberty and look cool. They never like. I was thinking about this and wanting to get myself in a lot of trouble on Twitter, which I haven't done yet. But so many Republicans are now wanting to essentially declare war on Mexico.
Yeah, which is insane.
Because of the opioid crisis, and one of the dynamics that we absolutely saw manifest itself in a wildly dangerous way during COVID was the collusion of big pharma and big government.
Yeah.
And I have this bizarre libertarian view that the perverse incentives that come out of the pharmaceutical industry have everything to do with government protection and the insatiable need to only produce the kinds of drugs that maximize patent-protected profits.
Yeah. Well,
and I think that's where the opioid crisis originates, but everything the government has done since then has made it worse.
To bring it back to my book, because that's what we're here to talk about.
You brought up you brought up opioids.
Well, but so the thing that I was thinking about with the book is that, because the other thing that we're seeing is this urban-rural divide, and you think about where sort of supplies will be concentrated, and one of the things that I posit in the book, which is, again, all this stuff is background, so it's not really, I think that a lot of fiction today gets very wrapped up in world building, which I find to be exhausting. It's just a lot of exposition, and it's just kind of boring to read through. But one of the things that I was thinking about, and these are all dots that are in the book for people to connect if they'd like to, and if they don't want to, that's all well and good. Is that cities are would hoard certain supplies, and you'd think medical supplies, especially like pharmaceuticals and things like that, you'd think that maybe cities are going to take more of those, or they're going to have more access to that stuff. And then if you're in the rural area, as our main character is, you have different things that you're able to trade with, but maybe you don't have access to certain drugs and things like that. And so now, that's the other conflict in the book, is how do you go get the thing that you need? Yeah. And
so like one of the things that I like about this book is what you just said. It's not all spelled out for the reader, and this is what Bob Dylan famously does. He refuses to tell people what his songs are about. Yeah, and he's like, "You figure it out," and they think he literally says that. And so when I read this book, the quest, and I don't know how much spoiling we want to do. But it strikes me that the drugs that are needed to save the loved one. Mm-hmm. How specific do you want to get? People are gonna, after we talk about this, they're gonna have to buy it.
I think that there's basically we can get into the part where he goes up to gets to basically just before the trade-off. That's okay. We'll talk about the first third of the book. So it's all mood setting. Yeah.
Well, and here's how I interpreted it, and you don't actually say this in the book, but I'm extrapolating from the experience, and my pharma rant was not totally irrelevant to this. My sense is that whatever his wife is struggling with, she's chronically ill. She desperately needs drugs. The drugs are not available. My sense is that big pharma has created a dependency.
I don't know what you're talking about.
And that, and I'm just thinking about the endless boosting that people are foisting upon us, and the potential of destroying immune systems. I don't know if we're going to get our freaking show banned.
I don't know anything about it. Well, that's the thing. That's what I like about comics as a medium, is that you can just leave breadcrumbs and see where people would like to go with it, and that's why I hate all this sort of this world building narrative stuff that people do, where it's like, I'm going to build out every single friggin' detail and tie it all together, because I'd rather let your mind wander and you can make these connections. Now, was I maybe thinking about this stuff when I was writing the book, drawing the book? Possibly. I don't know. I'm not going to answer. That's I also the COVID is not said in the book, so we're just assuming it's about COVID.
It could be.
It could be anything. It could be smallpox.
It could be a fungus.
Yeah, who knows? And that's and I know that you're watching The Last of Us. I played the first 10 minutes of the game, I think. And it's something constant throughout zombie fiction is like they generally never give up the ghost of where zombies came from or why they're there or because the cause isn't really all that important. It's sort of just it is, and as we're kind of finding out, in all likelihood the government did it.
Right. and so like this gets back
purely
to
speculative fiction,
the science fiction, and I compared this book to some sort of version that invokes both Ayn Rand's Anthem, a future dystopian novel that turned me on to libertarian ideas, and The Last of Us, which I am currently going through. I never played the game. I'm too much of a boomer to play games like that, but I do still watch shows, and I'm personally obsessed with zombie type shows. Specifically, it's not about zombies at all. I don't even.
They're never. The zombies are always just a trapping.
Yeah, it's about humans trying to figure out how to cope with things, and like I mentioned earlier, like the government, like all of the perverse incentives that are created when you give government too much power just explode because they're unchecked, and they're grossly self-serving, and they just become like the enemy.
Well, yeah.
And that's not really in here, but it's in the background.
Yeah.
It's in the border checks and all that.
Which we're like.
You need permission.
Yeah.
To go somewhere.
Which we all went through, and I mean, Djokovic is still going through that. He can't play tennis here.
Yeah.
So
I see people on Twitter when you say that you weren't allowed to leave your house, and it is objectively, literally true. And when I crossed state lines in, I don't know what it was, summer of 2020, whenever they started imposing all of those travel restrictions, I had to get a letter from Blaze TV's lawyer saying that I was a protected class. I was a journalist, so that I could cross state lines.
Yeah.
And so many lockdowners now say that never happened. That's ridiculous.
It totally did. And that's I think that's why, like, that's one of those things that, and we did the All We Have documentary about the Schnitzel House, a bar in New York, dealing with COVID restrictions and stuff like that. And that's why it's so important, and why I think that it's such a glaring hole in, I don't know, our artistic cultural movement, where there's just not a lot of stuff that's like, hey, remember that? Even going back to the sort of the War on Terror analogy, like when you compare the sort of, I'm seeing Chris Coyne's book over here, so it's also on top of mind seeing that. But when you compare the artistic response to, say, Vietnam, and then compare that to the response to Iraq, Afghanistan, and it's very different. Vietnam was way more critical, and I mean, granted, there was the draft and all that, and I think that people cared a lot more, but there's just not a robust questioning of what's going on. From the sort of cultural contingent.
Thank you for joining me today on Kibbe on Liberty, and for being part of our fiercely independent audience. Every week, my organization, Free the People, partners with Blaze TV to bring you this show. My guests bring smart perspectives on everything from current events to timeless philosophical debates. If you like what you hear, go to freethepeople.org/KOL and support Kibbe on Liberty so we can continue to produce these honest conversations with interesting people. Now, let's get back to it. Chris has, and since you invoked him, I just did a show with Chris Coyne, I don't know, a couple episodes ago, and he has a different book about government sort of hijacking art and entertainment as propaganda to defend the never-ending war machine.
Yeah, well, Top Gun Maverick maybe saved theaters, but it's also a really nice propaganda piece.
It is blatant propaganda. And I thought I was
They
struggling.
didn't even
I was
define
struggling.
who they're shooting down at the end,
Right.
because it can just
drop it in.
you can slap a new flag on in post every 10 years and you
Yeah.
pick a different war. I mean, it's clearly Russia.
But I think this is this is relevant to your book and why we need to sort of free the art to criticize government again, because I don't think, unfortunately, your dystopian futuristic story is completely believable, and maybe by the time it's published next week, we'll be living literally in that world. So like, we got to tell the story.
Well, my like whole premise was like, let's just like go down the cycle another like few times. Like if we go through COVID like 3 more times, like where do we end up? That was it. Which I kept having to stop myself where like I keep stopping and starting when I was trying to draw it, because I'd be like, this is shit keeps happening, and I'm like, I'm like it's not pushing out to fiction yet.
Yeah. Well,
and
so
that was sort of a real problem for me.
it's interesting that you invoke 9/11 and then lockdowns as these two defining exogenous events in your life that really changed your world. And I would very much say the same. Like anyone that lived through these two things, if they didn't change your world, you must be living in a hole somewhere.
You have to be. I mean, the and again with 9/11, like I don't know that I definitely didn't appreciate it in the moment, but looking back, you can see how completely different things were after that. I mean, I think that people thought that, like, after COVID, people thought that there was going to be that 9/11 getting together thing, like, oh, we're all in it together, and that turned out that was complete bullshit, because the whole way they went about it was entirely about drawing people further apart.
Right.
And so of course that was never going to happen. And that was just a piece that I remember from the sort of the start of it. There were these moments where you like, you know, there were things that were interesting because you're now all on the computer, and you know, you got a lot of time to yourself, assuming that you weren't deemed essential. You know, my sister is a nurse, and my brother-in-law, who's also a nurse, they were working the whole time. But then also, like, they were treated like pariahs.
Right.
So, like,
they were working the whole time. They probably
they were
got
the
COVID.
They were the only
OG
two
generation.
people that I would see pretty frequently, other than my wife. And it's like, they were also the two people who, like, if you were to read the internet, are like, oh, you should stay away from them. And it's like, well, what the fuck else? And
then we fired them if they refused to get vaccinated.
Right.
Yeah.
So, it just again, it just to me, House on Fire as a book is for me, it's an emotional record of a time period.
Yeah.
And there's a sci-fi sort of the plot element of it, but my hope with it, and this is what I think is a thing that comics can express in a way that a novel can't or a film can't, is that because you sit there and you're holding it and you're reading it, and because it's pictures, but there's not a lot, like, you can put a lot of yourself into it as well. Like, you the reader is piecing together what happens from panel to panel, and there's a lot of interplay there. So my hope with it, and why it's not an overly wordy book, even, you know, in spite of the fact that I also don't like writing a lot of words, is that people can reflect upon their own experiences from the past few years and hopefully be able to reassess what went on. You know, I don't want to. I have a little. The only artist statement within the book, other than obviously the book existing, is I have a little afterword. Basically, you know, like, I became a dad last year, and so my hope is that when Helen's old enough to read it, that she, like, it'll be complete fiction to her.
It's fiction again.
I don't think that's going to be true, unfortunately, but, like, I would hope that. And so I think that it's all, the onus is on us to sort of, this should be a cautionary tale of what happened. And and I think we should be worried about what the government is going to do with all these new powers.
Well, the thing, the question of I want to get back to propaganda, because the reason Free the People exists, and the reason that you and I work together, is that we think that culture, the direction and the conversation in culture, is far more important than what happens downstream in the next election. And we've now lived through this period. I think one of the big reveals of the last 3 years is that the government itself has hijacked the cultural narrative by not just by censoring people on Twitter and Facebook, but by buying creators and buying those platforms.
Think about all of the places that Fauci appeared in the early days of the sort of like lockdown. He appeared on on everywhere. I listened to a sports podcast, and they had him on. I guarantee the government.
I assume that was before that pitch.
Huh?
Before the pitch.
Yeah. But I guarantee. But that the government was pushing him out there, and this was when they were still doing 10 days to stop the spread, which is also turned out to be complete bullshit. So they pushed that hard, and they hit every single outlet with it, and it was inescapable, and it definitely broke a lot of brains in the process. And I think there's still some irrational fears of things with it.
Yeah.
And they kind of spike up and down. The fact that they're still doing take a COVID test, and it's like, well, who gives a shit? Doesn't matter. What are you gonna do about it? That's the what are you gonna? You're gonna buy more COVID tests, and then you're gonna sleep, and then you'll be okay in a couple days. The actions are the same. It doesn't matter at this point. It's not. You wouldn't take a flu test. It'd be like, I got the flu. And if you're really sick, you'll go to the hospital.
So I wonder if the coordinated government efforts revealed by Elon Musk to
revealed by all those those journos.
Twitter. Well documented at this point, but we sort of knew elements of that were happening all along.
We have eyes and a brain,
right?
Every conspiracy theory is a conspiracy theory until it seems to come true with this COVID stuff.
But back to the Chris Coyne point. So we know that creators and dissident voices were systematically suppressed during lockdowns. They weren't allowed on the shows. They weren't allowed on the platforms. They weren't allowed to tell those alternative stories. But Chris Coyne has documented how the government, and particularly the military-industrial complex, has always done that by buying comics, for instance.
Yeah.
And yet the dissidents broke through. So was it different then? Is just more systematized now, but it's the same thing. Because to publish a comic, you need distribution, but
it's so much cheaper and smaller. The stakes are so small with comics, and now it's bigger because every mega blockbuster is based off of a superhero comic, it seems like. But I think, as far as free expression goes, the medium of comics is still a really potent one. The difference too, though,
because you didn't need permission. You found a dissident publisher. Talk about the publisher for a second.
Oh yeah. So Living the Line, Sean, who we had on when we discussed AI, is small publisher, but he's got distribution, and I liked working with him because he's also a very, very capable, talented artist in his own right. So he was able to help me kind of level up my game in a number of ways. But it's a smaller print run, but you get distribution. Hopefully it picks up. Hopefully people buy it, and can go the costs of making a comic, other than printing it, the person drawing it's time. I mean, and I'm going to draw regardless, so it doesn't, when I send it to Sean, I was like, I'm drawing this book no matter what. Like, if you like it, I'd love for you to publish it. And it worked out perfectly. But, what's the cost of, now the cost of paper is going up, but still, compared to every other form of media, right? It's a pretty cheap one to produce. And readership is going up. I think readership for a lot of the superhero sort of, monthly comics is going down, but every other comics medium sort of piece is going up because I think it's a super potent art form.
Is it like music where people are getting more choices, so it's more decentralized?
It's decentralized. Yeah, and I think people are getting them in different places, and also like there's so many more options now, and there's so many more different readers. Everything used to be focused. I think that this is I think the thing that comics medium struggles with is there is a level of infantilization about it because it was so long just dominated by superheroes. So a lot of other stuff doesn't always get a chance in the comics market. But now there's such a large book market where you think about all the young adult stuff, all the middle grade readers. There's tons of comics, and now there's a lot more adult stuff that isn't like superhero stuff, which I to me, and there are a lot of people in our space who spend a lot of time criticizing what Marvel and DC does, which it gets you clicks, I suppose, but to me all that stuff doesn't matter because I think people are waiting for someone to come out with like another Batman story that's really great, and it's like, well, like I don't know, Frank Miller kind of did already. Like there are enough Batman pieces in the past that are just the pinnacle. Like no one today is gonna top. Like Miller himself couldn't top himself. So like I'd rather these things just die. Like the legacy pieces will stay and the good ones will live on because they're good. But I don't know. I don't think anyone's got new ideas for these characters. It's why these Marvel movies are so, in my opinion, just safe. And they're boring to me because it's just you can't.
It's all recycled.
It's all recycled. It's the same shit over and over again. And there's no like emotional stake to it. And I think that a lot of stuff outside of that realm, if people give it a chance, has more to show them, and I think that this is I think that people are that sort of culture is starting to buck back against it, but I feel like for quite a while we've suffered through a lot of meaningless culture, content for content's sake, which is this is what we were talking about in that AI episode a bit, is that we're sort of at a point where there's just a glut of just content. And it's not necessarily giving you any nutrition. And I think that it's important to make something that means something.
If you made it this far into the show, it means I must be doing something right. Kibbe on Liberty is just one of the amazing products we create at Free the People. We tell emotionally compelling stories and produce educational videos for the Liberty curious. Our award-winning documentaries personalize all things liberty, independence, creativity, hard work, integrity, and perseverance. After the show, check out our work at freethepeople.org. And if you like what you see, donate to support what we do. That's freethepeople.org. Now back to the show. But you're just describing the process of creative destruction, where things play out and they become dominant and tired and boring.
I feel like we're almost at that peak where it's boring.
Yeah. Is this so? Is your book the one that's going to break the system?
That would be really wonderful for me.
Yeah.
I could use it. It'd be great.
Well, there's.
While I'm hoping that the college system breaks before baby girl is going to college, I'm not holding out hope for that. So it would be great if the book takes.
Imagine how much college is going to cost.
I know.
In 17 years. So how many zeros?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm hoping the bubble bursts, but I just unfortunately I'm not. I can't stake my.
Well, I think I know what you're going to say, but like the comics are definitely sort of comics and comedians. Not, I don't mean comic as comedian, but like these are places where the rules are broken and new cultural trends happen.
Yeah, because they're easy to break them.
Yeah,
I think that books it's tough because a book is like novels are. I don't know. You got to read them. They're all about words.
Not your forte.
And films are expensive. Like movies are expensive. And you don't have a lot of the big studios where they don't seem to be taking as many risks anymore. Like I just at least that's what it feels like. There are obviously smaller pictures that I think are interesting. There's the whole horror genre is there are tons of people playing in that genre. I unfortunately am very too squeamish for most horror, so I don't really care for. I don't watch a lot of horror. But that's a realm that seems to have a lot of experimentation, seems to be doing a lot in, because horror is a cheaper film to produce. But there just doesn't seem to be a ton of that sort of mid-range movie. And then TV, there's a lot going on, but TV is just such a freaking time investment for the viewer, in my opinion. It drives me nuts. Everyone's like, I've got this show for you. And it's like, okay. And it's like, yeah, it's like we're 5 seasons in. And it's like, well, how many hours is that? And it's like, yeah, it's going to take you like a lot of time to catch up on. And I'm like, no,
there's
do it.
There's so much like
everyone loves Yellowstone. It's like, okay, well, if I'd like to watch Yellowstone now, you're like, there's 5 seasons of regular Yellowstone, but hold on. They got 2 prequel series that are both like now like 4 seasons. And then they're probably coming out with another series, and it's like, fuck it. No, not doing it.
That's what's happened to The Walking Dead. I'm old enough to remember when you dragged me to Comic-Con.
Oh yeah.
And The Walking Dead was still this disruptive,
it just
cool,
had started, I think,
new thing, and that was always my example of how comic culture could influence popular culture. And I'm a bigger fan of The Walking Dead than you probably are. But
well, The Walking Dead did this to me as both a TV watcher and a comics reader, because I was reading the comic. I started like picking that book up like in single issues, like around like the 3rd trade paperback volume area. Mm-hmm. So pretty, I don't know, it was probably like issue 18 or something in the run, right? And then I fell behind on the single issues, and so I switched to the trades. And then I fell behind on the trades, and then I switched to hardcovers. And then I fell behind on the hardcovers, and I switched to the omnibus. And then I just stopped reading it because I was like, I can't keep up. And then the TV show is also like, you miss like a couple episodes, and you're just like, I'm not gonna catch back up again. And I read the final issue of the comic because I just wanted to see how he ended it, but it was a lot. I mean, that's a long book. One day maybe I'll go, but the problem was like, again, with everything, like, you'd get to a point, and then you'd pick it up again, and then you'd be like, shit, I can't even remember what was happening. And then you feel like you got to go all the way back to issue 1, and that's like it's a lot of reading.
Is that why you don't use a lot of words in your books?
Yeah, I like.
What is the genre like? I assume there's a tradition of telling the story through the art itself with as few words as possible. Is that true, or is this a Battaglia innovation?
I think, and so Paul Pope is a hero of like our comics hero of mine, and Pope's.
We should have angels sing every time you say Paul Pope.
I did. I think we talked about it at some point in time, but when Pope did a Batman comic, and Batman rescues Mises from the Nazis.
Ludwig von Mises. Yes, that's a drinking point for this episode.
And Rush was your intro, and Paul Pope was mine. But I did recently purchase 2 of the original art pages from that book. and they're incredible. He draws like 19 by 24. They're posters. It's amazing. But anyways, I think that so Pope describes his sort of philosophy for comics making, and the more that I've read, the more I think that this is what it feels right for me. But he sort of merges the Japanese tradition and the European tradition and has fused it into his own form, and a lot of that, the Japanese manga, for a lot of it, it's not so much in a lot of the you're not getting it in your Dragon Ball Z necessarily, but a lot of the sort of there's a lot more focus on mood and sort of emotion in manga. I feel like they do a lot of just panels that are just sort of they come together to give you an idea of of a feeling, right? They're not necessarily, the panels aren't necessarily moving some sort of narrative or plot forward. They're there to get you into a mindset. And then the European style, I think the Europeans seem to favor more contained stories. Manga, obviously a lot of manga goes on for 100 volumes or some shit, and it's just a lot of reading, but they're faster reads because they're not super wordy usually, and they're a lot of Western comics today are very they're either very wordy, the art's super, they're trying to go so far into realism that it's exhausting on your eyeballs, and so they're very slow to scan, and you don't actually get as much out of it, I think, as quickly, right? Whereas a manga or a European book, you can read them faster, but I feel like you the reader get more out of it sometimes. There's more cartooning, right? Whereas I think in a lot of Western books, there's not as much cartooning going on anymore, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
At least mainstream stuff. I don't even know where I was going with it. That was a comics riff, but I do think that's why it's such a versatile medium.
The inspiration for the style of book that you've created.
Yeah, I was trying to sort of I was trying to work in that style because I think that I like that, and I don't want to try to make everything this super. I don't want to try to represent reality because I'm not that great of an artist. I know what my strengths are, and I think that the way that I drew it, I'm trying to draw with an emotion, and so I hope that the way that I drew the panels, even if they're not perfect, there's something that you can gain. It tells you something just within the style.
So tell me if you buy this metaphor. It's less of a novel and almost more like a song where there's.
Oh, that was the other point that I was going to bring up.
Okay.
So that's another there is another. I think that I try to think of things as I would love to be a musician. I don't have any musical ability. But I think that music does an amazing thing, and that's why people have such a deep connection, I think, with music. Is that there's so many levels of things going on, and you can connect on an emotion level, you can connect on this aesthetic level. There's the sort of the lyrical story that's being told, and so yeah, I definitely I would like to make comics that feel like an album.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another element.
I want to go back just because you dropped some Easter eggs there about Paul Pope. So he has written
THB is I think a libertarian. Should people? And
what is that?
Well, I've heard it described as Atlas Shrugged on Mars.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's this is gonna be sacrilege to you, but I think it's much better than Atlas Shrugged. But the thing that's tough is that it's hard to come by copies of it because he self-published it in the 90s, and this is again this is sort of the.
Did you have a copy?
I've been tracking a bunch of them down on eBay, and it's one of those things where it's I think he's done interviews where he said once he finishes, he did a book called Battling Boy, which is a young adult graphic novel, and I think he's on the hook to do the second volume of it. And then once that comes out, they'll publish the reprint of all the THB stuff.
Okay.
And that hasn't come out yet. So I think everyone's just kind of waiting for it to come out. So a friend of this program, Taylor Millard, I don't know if
Millard.
Yeah. I think he had at one point reached out to Paul and was like, "Hey, could I get some copies of THB?" And he basically pointed him to some websites and was like, "Yeah, you can either try to find it on eBay, or you can just kind of here's some PDFs."
Probably more expensive than buying a Springsteen ticket.
No, it's not. I've done it. I've done both, and it's not right now.
Okay, so where do people buy this book?
Wherever you buy books. So you can go on Amazon, you can go on Barnes & Noble, it's in Target. If you want to go on Target.com, you can order it. If you've got a comic shop,
isn't that selling out? Like,
I don't care.
Shouldn't you?
Wherever it's easy enough for you to buy it.
I don't care.
If you have a local bookstore you like going to, they can order a copy. I mean, you can buy it direct through my publisher, livingthelinebooks.com. You can go to my website. I have links to it, mattjbat.com. But yeah, wherever you want to buy it. Comic shops are a great option, but honestly, if you just buy a copy, that's what matters to me.
And we're toying with the idea.
Would love to.
Of making this into a dramatic film.
Motion picture.
A motion picture.
A
film. Which you've already made the case as to why we shouldn't watch those because it takes too long.
Well, no, I think that
except this one.
If I were to do it, there are things that would expand that I just didn't feel like honestly like things that I didn't. I wanted to give some of the characters a little bit, if I were to make it into a film, I'd give some more characters a little bit more to do. But drawing it would have just been I right now 100 pages was where I could get to. My next book, maybe I'll be able to get to 200 or something, but I wanted to be done with it.
Yeah. And if anybody is watching The Last of Us, it very much invokes this, even though this was finished before the series actually was released.
Yeah, and yeah.
So it's in that genre. If you
like that, you'll like this.
Cool. And where do people find you so that they can yell at you on social media?
I am Matt J. Bat everywhere.
Everywhere.
So.
And you can be contacted at freethepeople.org.
I can.
All right.
That's correct.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. If you liked the conversation, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and also ring the bell for notifications. And if you want to know more about Free the People, go to freethepeople.org.